All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting into my favorite part of this video. This is part two of us finding a definition, a working definition of the term Pan-Africanism. Just like I mentioned before, I am in a process of publishing my second book, which is titled Hard Pressed, A Revolutionary Tale. And a major focus in the book is on this term Pan-Africanism. Young revolutionaries young people who consider themselves to be revolutionaries, trying to start a movement that focuses on Pan-Africanism, right? So, yep, those of you who watched the first video, you already know our working definition. And like I explained before, in this video, I'm going to be going over the notes that I've created when trying to make that working definition of Pan-Africanism. So yeah. So hopefully you guys can understand that I will be as sensitive as possible with my perspective, but it is a perspective, right? And I just want to be as honest as possible about where I stand with my findings, right? It's almost like Paulo Freire has mentioned that as educators, we shouldn't be so objective and detached from the information that we acquire. Instead, we should take a moral stance and you know uh, point out what we think is right and what we think is wrong, right? And observers can actually relate better with us, and we won't seem so detached from society like most politicians are. So yeah, just understand that I am trying my best to, um, just be honest and transparent with where I stand. And I am flexible. So if you have information that I am not mentioning, or if I'm giving false information, you can give me more accurate information. I welcome that wholeheartedly. I'm just here to seek truth, to speak truth, um, to the best of my abilities. All right, so here we are. We have our working definition of Pan-Africanism. Now let's get into the argument of whether or not North Africans, those who are of Arab descent, if they can be considered to be a part of um, the African diaspora and included in this concept known as Pan-Africanism. So I'm going to go up to my first bit of notes to see. I'm going to go up, not down, to my first bit of notes to see, um, to see, oh, up, the other up, that's down. Keep going up. I'm sorry, I have a helper too. Like, I'm trying not to be too distracted all the way up to the first note. Right there. Down. See, first note. All right, there we are. All right. So, thank you so much, my amazing assistant, who is helping me create this and inspired me to get this going. So, I appreciate the help. This is a team effort right here. All right. So, here we go. All right. So, from my research, I can see that most, if not all, references to the dehumanization of Black people focuses on the transatlantic slave trade. All right, so this is interesting. So when I was doing my research, you guys, and I was trying to um, see the roots of Pan-Africanism, it seemed like every single speaker that I was listening to and every website that I visited, they all looked at the transatlantic slave trade as the roots of this revitalized Pan-Africanist spirit. And it kind of didn't sit well with me because I know from my past research that there has been another form of dehumanization towards Black people before the transatlantic slave trade, where Europeans were taking Black people across the Atlantic Ocean into the quote unquote New World. But even before that experience, you guys, there was the trans-Saharan slave exchange, right? This slave trade, which was happening before the European slave trade, was happening in the Middle East. And in the slave trade, millions of Africans were taken in this instance as well and dehumanized, removed, and it's just as tragic as of a story as the transatlantic slave trade. So I'm going to be focusing on that um, reality here, so that we are not ignoring this very real, an important part of history, and something that still impacts the region today. So that's my first reason why I personally do not see um, I do not see the North Arabs who are in Africa, who live in Africa, on the African continent. I'm not so sure if we should be so quick as to um, say that that the Arabs are also African. Um, Here are further notes in that same note. So yes, during that trans-Saharan slave trade, we see over 6 million Black people being taken from the continent of Africa and sent into the Near East and into the Far East. And there seems to be a blind eye to Arab oppression. Even to this day, if you look on the news, you'll see many accounts of Black people who are seeking refuge in the wealthy and prosperous Europe. As they're passing through North America, they have to go through these Arab-held territories, and there's so many accounts of Black people from interior countries in Africa being abused in this process. Um, um, and we still see the remnants of this racism or racial superiority, a superiority complex that's happening there to this very day. But there seems to be like a blind eye turned to this occurrence, right? A blind eye to Arab oppression towards Black people, and it's probably due to the fact that the fact that there's a blind eye turned to it, and people aren't talking about it that much. And if we look at the African Union, we can see that Arab or North African countries who are also Arab are actually in the African Union. So this is all happening. This blind eye and this inclusion is probably happening just because of the fact that Arabs have been in North America or North Africa for quite some time. My research shows that Middle Easterns have been trying to get into Africa for since the second millennium BCE. This is when dynastic Egypt was, was around and slowly eroding into not the Egypt that we see inscribed in the pyramids and in hieroglyphic messages, but a different Egypt entirely. And this has happened, this loss of Egyptian identity has happened because of this slow and ongoing invasion from Middle Easterners into the African continent. And what was once slow, once there was enough, control over the area of Egypt and North Africa, we started to see a huge influx of Arabs into North Africa, particularly during the time of the spread of the religion of Islam after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And yes, this is where you see a huge drive from Middle Easterners and Arabs to take hold of North Africa and to establish themselves firmly. So it's been centuries since that has happened, and it seems like it's been for like a thing that has always been there, but real historians understand that this Arab identity is a slow and ongoing process over 4 millennia, right? Um, you see, and you think like 4 millennia, that sounds like a long time. 4,000 years, that's 2000 BCE, but we have to remember that Africa is very ancient, right? And this is a modest estimate that the Egyptian old dynasty with its first pharaoh Narmer that actually took place during the third millennium BCE, right? So this is 30 or fourth millennium BCE. This is 3100 BCE when the first pharaohs of Egypt are rising, right? So Egypt was already around for a millennia before you see Arabs making like a huge dent in this Egyptian identity. So that's another story entirely. But the point of the matter is that there seems to be a blind eye on Arab oppression towards Black Africans. And I just want to shed light on that reality because it is a reality and it's an ongoing or enduring issue for Black and Arab relations to this very day. Um, also maybe the reason why we take a, I also wrote that the reason why we took a blind, probably take a blind eye to Arab oppression towards the Black people in Africa is because we kind of see Arabs as another oppressed groups when looking at them in relation to the white world, right? And their relative domination of other races around the world, right? And that's economically, that's militarily, and that's also culturally, right? So when we look at the Middle East, and what's happening between European nations and the Middle East, we see probably the West as being the aggressor these days. These days, mind you, because it wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, the Ottoman Empire ruled large parts of Europe, and there were European slaves in the Arab world, right? So but today we see it, Arab community as a part of the oppressed groups. Probably that's why we turn a blind eye to the fact that they too have caused much harm for Black Africans and continue to do so. Um, yeah, so that's one note, one thing that to consider. Next note, let's see. I'll try to get through these notes a little faster. Another reason why we should consider whether or not um, North African Arabs or Arabs who lives in North Africa, if we should take a reconsider whether or not they should be a part of this term Pan-Africanism or in the African Union. It says here that ever since the start of that Pan-Africanist movement, there has been debate on whether or not Arabs in North Africa should be considered as true Africans. I'm going to relate this question to the example of Jesus personified. I love to relate things to Jesus. He was the first, person I learned about growing up as a Baptist Christian. So, plenty of examples of Jesus and, how we can learn from his example. But anyways, using Jesus in this instance, it says that, is Jesus a Christian or a Jew, right? And even though Jesus is considered the Christ, he is still a self-proclaimed Jew, right? So similarly to a North African or Arab who lives in North Africa, yes, they're on the continent and they can say that they're African, right? Because they're on the continent, they're in the physical location of Africa, right? But if you ask them who are they will tell you that they are Arab. They wouldn't tell you that they're African. They'll say that they're Arab and they live in Africa, right? That is a clear line, almost like if you would have asked Jesus, what is he? What religion is he? What does he follow? He would say that he's a Jew. He wouldn't say that he's a Christian. Two examples of two quotes that says, you know, this is Jesus speaking. It says, "You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We Jews know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." This is John uh, chapter 4, verse 22. And also Jesus says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." This is Matthew 15:24. Him identifying himself as a Jew, even though today, if you ask most Christians, what do they think Jesus was? Was Jesus a Christian? Most people will probably say Jesus was a Christian, right? They're a Christian, they follow Jesus as Christ, is Christian, makes sense to them, right? But he's a self-proclaimed Jew, and he came for the lost children of Israel, right? The lost sheep of Israel. That is the straight from the lion's mouth. So I don't mean to bring up controversy with where Jesus is, where Jesus stands. We'll talk about that later on my Sundays. But today we're just going to focus on this. I just wanted to relate that to are North African Arabs African, or are they Arabs, right? This is another fact to consider. Even though North African Arabs live on the continent of Africa, they are self-proclaimed Arabs who speak the Arab language, have Arab ancestry links to the Middle East, and practice Arab religions, who have historically enslaved, oppressed Black Africans in particular, right? So, how could one consider themselves to be a part of the same group that they have time and again acted against, right? The interest of, right? Um, by and large, right? For the most part. Another note, just look at the rest of Africa. This is my favorite note. So I thought, so just look at the rest of Africa and the many different languages that they speak, even within the same country, right? If you look at any African country, they speak there's more than 10 languages in every single, way more than 10 languages in every single country within Africa, right? This is how diverse Africans are, right? This is how you know of Africans, right? The many different languages, different cultures on the continent, right? But if you look at North Africa and you look at those countries along the rim, you will see that they all speak only one language. No matter how diverse they look, they all speak the same language, which is a language that is not African, right? It is Middle Eastern, right? They speak Arabic, and there's no distinctions there. The only time that you'll see people speaking a different language in North Africa is if they are the few people who are able to get a college education and they speak another European language, right? Maybe some French, maybe some English, right? Um, or it's the few, natives who are still in these locales, whether it's Egypt or Morocco, who still speak that native language from that region, because there are indigenous people still in these areas, and you'll see that they speak a different language, right? So that's another thing to consider, right? The identities, right? Identity marker. Let's see. Also, this is something else I wanted to mention. So let's see. The ruling political parties in Egypt identified themselves as the United Arab Republic, and this is according to Britannica. The United Arab Republic was a political union of Egypt and Syria, who proclaimed themselves as that name, the United Arab Republic, in 1958. And this was during the first conference of independent African states in 1958. So that before the African Union, and when these groups got together, these independent African countries got together, and Egypt was a part of that organization, they even in that group, even in that United African group, they called themselves the United Arab Republic, as opposed to something more fitting, which would be the United African Republic, but even today, um, Egypt is not really known as only Egypt. Not a lot of people know that, but they actually are known as, um, uh, scroll down. Today, Egypt is known as the Arab Republic of Egypt, right? So it's known as the Arab Republic of Egypt. It's not known as the African Republic of Egypt, right? The Arab Republic of Egypt. So it's a distinction there, and it baffles me how there's a controversy behind whether or not we should consider Arabs Africans. One last thing that I did want to mention, I know that this is extending quite long, is I want us to understand like an example of whether or not we should consider Arabs Africans. We just need to look at what are the results of the large results of Arab African relations. Yes, it was a beautiful religion that was able to be shared, the religion of Islam. But me personally, I also see that African religions have a lot of beauty in them, and I think that Black people should be taking a more critical look at these traditional African religions to have their own point of view and not the point of view of, outside religions who are naturally going to look at them, at the other as being less than. So just, understanding like that we have our own mind to observe and to learn from. And if we are honest with ourselves with what we're learning, we'll see that, it's some good stuff there, right? And we'll see a lot of falsehoods in what was said about these religions. But long story short, an example of these Arab African relations can be seen in what's happening in Chad today, or not Chad, but Sudan, and in Sudan since independence, right? So in Sudan, we see that there was a civil war between the Arab influenced north and the nativist south, which ineffectively led to the country splitting into in 2011, right? So that clash between Arab north and African south, right? North Arabs, you see it happening within this country itself of Sudan. And the Arab North, you see it, the Arab North win actually crush the South, right? And you see huge oppression of the nativist South. And you see, they once called it a genocide of the natives of the South, right? And when in reality, you look at who's actually doing it is black and black, right? But Black people who have thoroughly convinced themselves that they are separate peoples because of their religious ties, right? And we see we see that happening, right? This split from an Arab identity and a native identity, and that fight still continues today. Right now, we have a struggle between um, uh, the military groups, two military groups in Sudan, and um, in this struggle, you guys, in this struggle, it started off in 2019 as a democratic revolution, but of course, there was the military parts of this revolution took control, and we see that these two factions that are now fighting today, even though they're both of the north and they're both Arab, one seems to be a little bit more extreme Arab and is getting support from Arab countries in the Middle East, which is the RSF. And we see this ongoing conflict of Arab identity within Africa that is, quite frankly, laying waste to Black bodies, right? And sure, we can see it as as a resistance against Western domination on the continent, right? And the resistance coming in the form of Islamic um, uh, um, fervor. But the fact of the matter is, even though we're presuming ourselves to be resisting Western influences, the bodies that are the result of this fight is black bodies, right? Nativists, right? So you see black people who are losing in the end, and it's tragic, right? So I just wanted to bring up these points. I don't want to cause more trouble with this information. Hopefully, what I'm bringing to you guys is allowing you to see more clearly what may be happening and to hopefully make a wiser decision on whether or not uh, uh, who we should be letting into this solidarity movement of African pure or African identity, Black identity, and Pan Africanism and unity amongst Black people around the world. Because we have to be aware of letting in the wrong people. We know from past experiences that when we let in the wrong people, things tend to go outside of what we originally planned, right? And we end up losing to other people's detriment. I'm not saying that solidarity can't be had outside of our own people in time, but I think we should be wary of what has been happening and learn from the past, and to find true unity. The only way we can do that is if we can be honest with what we identify as and who we identify with. Um, so hopefully this is helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and yeah, leave some comments and let's have a dialogue about this. And hopefully we can all learn and grow and and become better people. Uh, but with the ultimate goal of peace for Black people in particular, when we're talking about this concept of Pan Africanism. So yeah, peace and love, y'all.